The widow received a vacant lot, but what she discovered there changed her life. Sarah Mitchell clutched the worn-out suitcase tightly as she gently rocked little Nathan in her arms. At 24, she was completely alone in the world, with no money and no prospects after her in-laws kicked her out of the house where she lived, claiming she was an unnecessary burden. That's when the letter from the notary office arrived, the one that would change everything. Sarah had inherited a piece of land from a great-great-aunt she didn't even know existed, located in a small town called Golden Ridge in the countryside of Kentucky. With nowhere else to go and only $50 in her pocket, she made the riskiest decision of her life, to travel with her 2-month-old baby to see this mysterious inheritance. The bus ride lasted 14 endless hours. Nathan cried almost the entire night, and Sarah felt the judging stares of the other passengers. A grey-haired lady sitting next to her muttered comments about very young mothers who don't know how to care for their children. Sarah pretended not to hear, focusing on calming the baby and not letting despair take over. Arriving in Golden Ridge, Sarah got off the bus in the central square of a town that seemed to have stopped in time. Simple houses with exposed bricks spread along the cobblestone streets, and the few people moving about observed her with curiosity and distrust. She asked a man where Acacia Street was, the address of the lot, and he pointed in a direction away from the center. Walking along the dirt road with the heavy suitcase in one hand and Nathan in the other, Sarah began to question if she had made the right decision. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, and she stopped several times to drink water from a bottle that was already half empty. The only buildings she saw were small houses scattered and very far apart. When she finally found the number indicated in the documentation, Sarah felt her heart sink. The lot was a large plot covered in tall weeds, with a barbed wire fence in terrible condition and a small brick shack in the back that looked more like a ruin. A faded sign indicated that this was indeed the property described in the inheritance papers. Sarah pushed the rusty gate, which creaked loudly and nearly came off its hinges. She crossed the lot, stepping on dry earth and loose stones, dodging branches that tried to scratch her simple dress. The shack had a wooden door with peeling paint and 2 small windows with broken glass. When she pushed the door, it gave way easily, revealing a dark and dusty interior. The inside consisted of only 2 rooms, a small living room connected to an even smaller bedroom. There was no furniture, just some old wooden crates and a lot of accumulated dirt. The smell of mold was almost unbearable. Sarah sat on one of the crates and began to cry silently, feeling she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Nathan started crying too, probably from hunger, and Sarah realized she needed to find an urgent solution. She decided to go back to the town center to look for the inn she had seen near the square. Maybe she could negotiate a low price for a few days while she decided what to do with the lot. The Bluegrass Inn was an old 2-story building painted yellow with blue details. Sarah entered the small lobby where a robust woman of about 50 was organizing papers behind a dark wooden counter. The woman looked up and examined Sarah from head to toe with evident disapproval. "Good afternoon, I'd like to know the price of a room for a few days," Sarah said politely. "We don't have any vacancies," the woman replied curtly, without even consulting any register. "But I saw empty rooms through the windows," insisted Sarah. "Those rooms are reserved," the woman crossed her arms. "And even if we did, we don't accept people with babies. They make too much noise and disturb the other guests." Sarah felt the humiliation burn her cheeks. It was obvious the refusal had more to do with her appearance as a young woman, alone, and clearly without money than with any rule of the inn. "Please, I just need a place for a few nights. I can pay in advance," she tried once more. "I already said we have no vacancies. Try the next town over." The woman went back to shuffling her papers, clearly ending the conversation. Sarah left the inn, feeling the mix of anger and despair grow in her chest. She walked through the streets looking for other options, but the town was very small, and there were no hotels or other inns. Some people she passed looked at her with curiosity, but no one offered to help. When the sun began to set, Sarah realized she would have to spend the night on the property after all. She went back to the shack carrying Nathan, who had fallen asleep during the walk. On the way, she stopped at a small grocery store and bought a packet of crackers a can of powdered milk, and a few other basic necessities with the little money she had. The store owner, a short bald man named Mr. Robert, was kinder than the innkeeper. He asked if Sarah was new in town, and she briefly explained about the inheritance. Mr. Robert nodded and commented that he vaguely remembered Aunt Dorothy, but that she had disappeared many years ago. Back at the property when it was already dark, Sarah improvised a bed with some clothes from the suitcase on the least dirty floor of the shack. She gave Nathan a bottle and ate some crackers, trying not to think about the cold that would soon come. The walls had holes that let the wind in, and there was no electricity. During the first night, Sarah hardly slept. Besides the physical discomfort, she heard strange noises coming from somewhere on the property. They sounded like muffled sounds, as if something was moving underground. Nathan also slept poorly, waking up several times crying. When dawn came, Sarah went out to explore the property better in the daylight. She walked through the tall weeds, looking for the source of the nighttime noises. In an area at the back, where the vegetation was less dense, she noticed the ground seemed different. It was as if there was a depression disguised by the grass. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Intrigued, Sarah began to clear the area with her own hands. Under a layer of dirt and dry leaves, she discovered what looked like a partially buried concrete lid. The lid was about 1 meter in diameter and was sealed with a substance that looked like old cement. Sarah needed tools to investigate further, but she had no money to buy any. She remembered seeing some rusty tools at the back of the shack and went back to look. Among the debris, she found an old hammer, a screwdriver, and a piece of iron that could serve as a lever. Returning to the area with the lid, Sarah began to work carefully to break it without damaging what might be underneath. The work was difficult because she constantly had to stop to care for Nathan, who was restless from the heat and mosquitoes. After 2 hours of effort, she managed to break part of the seal. The lid shifted slightly, revealing there was indeed a cavity underneath. A strange smell, not bad but very strong, came from the opening. Sarah pushed the lid with all her strength and managed to open it completely. Underneath was a circular cistern about 3 meters deep. Contrary to what she expected, there was no water but rather a collection of objects carefully arranged. Sarah could see clay jars of different sizes, wooden boxes, and what appeared to be packages wrapped in cloth. Using an old rope she found in the shack, Sarah carefully lowered herself into the cistern. The strong smell was coming from the clay jars, which were sealed with wax. She opened one of the smaller ones and discovered it was full of various types of seeds, perfectly preserved. Each jar had a yellowed paper label with handwritten notes in cursive script. The notes were in Old Portuguese, but Sarah could understand that they were instructions on planting, care, and properties of each type of seed. Some plants had names she had never heard, and the descriptions of their medicinal properties were very detailed. In one of the wooden boxes, Sarah found a thick notebook bound in leather. The yellowed pages contained more notes on cultivation, remedy recipes, and even very precise botanical drawings. On the first page was written, "Knowledge of the Mitchell family, for my niece, who will come one day." Sarah felt a shiver as she read those words. It was as if her great-great-aunt Dorothy knew that one day someone in the family would need that knowledge. The most recent notes in the notebook dated from almost 20 years ago, a time when Sarah was just a child. She spent hours exploring all the contents of the cistern. There were jars with different types of seeds, pots with dried substances that looked like prepared medicines, and several notebooks with recipes and instructions. Everything was perfectly organized and preserved, as if someone had carefully prepared it for the future. When Sarah climbed back up, it was getting dark again, and she realized she had spent the entire day absorbed in the discovery. Nathan had slept in the shade she had improvised, but was now waking up hungry. She prepared the bottle and began to think about the meaning of everything she had found. During the second night, the strange noises did not happen. Sarah slept better and dreamed of the great-great-aunt she had never met. In the dream, an elderly woman with kind eyes showed her how to plant the seeds and explained that each one had a specific purpose. When she woke up, Sarah felt a strange certainty that she should try to cultivate those plants. The next morning, she decided to look for someone in town who could help her better understand what she had discovered. She remembered seeing a pharmacy on the main street and thought the pharmacist might be able to identify some of the plants described in the notebooks. The community pharmacy was a small but well-organized establishment. The owner, Dr. Henry, was a man of about 40, thin and wearing glasses, who received her with professional courtesy. Sarah explained that she had inherited some old home remedy recipes and would like to know if they had any value. Dr. Henry examined some of the notebooks Sarah had brought, and his interest visibly grew with each page. He asked several questions about where she had found that material and seemed especially interested in the seeds she mentioned. "These are very old and sophisticated formulations," he said finally. "Some of these plants are extremely rare nowadays. Where exactly did you say you found this?" Sarah hesitated before answering. Something about the pharmacist's eagerness made her suspicious. She gave a vague answer about inheriting it from an aunt and asked how much he thought the material might be worth. "Well, it's hard to assess without seeing the seeds themselves." Dr. Henry adjusted his glasses. "But I can make an offer for the entire lot. Let's say $5,000. The amount was much more than Sarah expected, but his haste to close the deal made her even more suspicious. She said she needed to think and left the pharmacy with a feeling that something was wrong. Walking down the main street, Sarah decided to look for the town library to research more about the plants. The municipal library was a small room attached to the health clinic, but it had a few books on botany and local history. The librarian, Professor Walter, was an elderly man with white hair and gentle manners who was genuinely interested in Sarah's story. He helped her find information on regional medicinal plants and mentioned that he vaguely remembered Aunt Dorothy. "She was known as the healer of the region," said Professor Walter. "People came from far away to consult with her. They said she had a special gift for healing, but also that she kept secrets about plants that she didn't share with anyone." "What happened to her?" asked Sarah. "She disappeared about 20 years ago. Some say she left town, others think she passed on. But no one ever found any traces or was certain." Professor Walter showed Sarah some books on the local flora, and she discovered that many of the plants described in her aunt's notebooks were considered extinct in the region. This explained the pharmacist's interest, but it also suggested the seeds were much more valuable than he had offered. During her research, Sarah found an interesting reference. An old newspaper article about a dispute involving land where rare medicinal plants grew. The article mentioned that outside businessmen were trying to buy properties in the region for commercial exploitation of the plants. "Professor Walter, do you know if there are still people interested in buying land here for plantations?" asked Sarah. "Oh yes, mainly a businessman from Louisville, Dr. Richard Foster. He has a natural products company and has already bought several plots in the area. Many people sold cheap because they didn't know the real value of the land." Sarah felt a chill down her spine. If the pharmacist was interested in the seeds, and there were businessmen buying land to cultivate medicinal plants, her discovery could be much more important than she had imagined. She spent the rest of the day in the library, noting down everything she could find about the plants from her aunt's notebooks. Some had very specific properties and were mentioned in scientific studies as having significant pharmacological potential. When she returned to the property in the late afternoon, Sarah made a decision. She would try to plant some of the seeds to see if she could grow them. If she succeeded, she could sell the plants for a fair price instead of parting with everything for a pittance. The problem was she didn't have proper tools, agricultural knowledge, and most importantly, money to invest in planting. Looking at the weed-covered land, Sarah wondered how she could turn it into a productive plantation. On the third night at the property, Sarah was awakened by a different noise, human footsteps around the shack. She lay still, holding Nathan, who fortunately kept sleeping. The footsteps circled the building several times, stopped at the door for a few seconds, and then moved away. In the morning, Sarah found footprints in the dirt around the shack. Someone had indeed been prowling around her property during the night. The footprints were from men's shoes, relatively large, and followed a pattern as if the person was investigating the place. Worried about her safety, Sarah decided to look for neighbors to ask if they had seen anything suspicious. The nearest house was about 200 meters away and belonged to a retired man named John Parker. Mr. John was a 65-year-old man, thin with sun-leathered skin, who lived alone in a simple but well-kept house. He welcomed Sarah with genuine hospitality, offering coffee and showing interest in her story. "So you're related to Mrs. Dorothy?" asked Mr. John. "She was a very wise woman. She helped me a lot when my wife was sick years ago. Did you know her well?" Sarah was eager to learn more about her aunt. "Yes, I did. She taught me many things about plants. To this day, I still use some remedies she showed me. When she disappeared, many people were sad. It was as if a treasure of the town had been lost." Mr. John confirmed that he had seen someone lurking around Sarah's property the night before, but couldn't identify who it was. He offered to help with security and suggested that Sarah befriend other neighbors. Mrs. Margaret, who lives in the blue house over there, was also a friend of Dorothy's. "She can tell you more stories," said Mr. John. Sarah thanked him and decided to visit Mrs. Margaret that same day. She was a lady of about 70, short with completely white hair, who received her with curiosity and a hint of suspicion. "So you say you're related to Dorothy?" Mrs. Margaret examined Sarah carefully. "I don't remember her mentioning family." "She was my great-great-aunt. I don't think we were in close contact," explained Sarah. Mrs. Margaret invited her in and prepared tea while telling stories about Aunt Dorothy. Sarah learned that she was respected by the entire community, but there were also people who envied her knowledge. "I always had the impression that she was hiding something important," said Mrs. Margaret thoughtfully. "Several times I saw her working on the property at night, as if she didn't want anyone to see what she was doing." "Do you have any idea what it could be?" asked Sarah. "I was never sure, but I always thought she kept secrets about plants she didn't want to share. She said some things were dangerous in the wrong hands." This conversation confirmed for Sarah that her discovery in the cistern was indeed what Aunt Dorothy had been hiding. She decided to trust Mrs. Margaret and told her about the seeds and notebooks. Mrs. Margaret's reaction was one of astonishment and concern. "My dear, you need to be very careful. If the wrong people find out about this, you could have problems. Dorothy hid those things for a reason." "What kind of problems?" Sarah was growing increasingly apprehensive. "There are people who would do anything to get those plants. The town pharmacist, for example. He always wanted to know Dorothy's secrets. And there's that businessman who's been buying up land." Mrs. Margaret recounted that she had witnessed situations where people were pressured to sell their properties for very low prices. Those who resisted ended up facing strange problems: dead animals, destroyed crops, even direct threats. Sarah felt real fear growing in her chest. She was alone with a baby, with no resources and apparently in possession of something powerful people wanted. The situation was much more dangerous than she had imagined. "What do you think I should do?" asked Sarah. "If I were you, I'd try to plant the seeds in secret. If you could grow the plants, then you could negotiate from a better position, but it would require great caution." Mrs. Margaret offered practical help. She had some gardening tools Sarah could use, and basic knowledge about cultivation she had learned from Aunt Dorothy. In return, she asked only for a small portion of the future harvest. Sarah accepted the proposal, feeling grateful to have finally found someone willing to help her without ulterior motives. They agreed that Mrs. Margaret would visit the property the next day to assess the best areas for planting. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Sarah organized the seeds by type, following the instructions from her aunt's notebooks. She set aside the ones that seemed easiest to cultivate to begin the first tests. Nathan was calmer, apparently adapting to the new routine. In the early hours, Sarah was awakened again by noises, but this time they were different. It sounded like someone was tampering with the property's fence. She got up quietly and looked through the broken window, but couldn't see anything in the darkness. In the morning, she discovered that part of the fence had been damaged, as if someone had tried to enter the property. The footprints were different from the previous nights, suggesting more than one person was interested in her land. When Mrs. Margaret arrived to help with the planting, Sarah told her about the nighttime incidents. The older woman grew even more concerned and suggested they work only during the day when visibility was better. Together, they cleared a small area at the back of the property, away from the view of anyone passing by on the street. The soil was surprisingly fertile, and Mrs. Margaret commented that Aunt Dorothy had always said that land was special. The first planting was done with great care. Sarah followed the notebook instructions exactly, preparing the soil with specific mixtures she had found in the cistern. Mrs. Margaret was impressed with the level of detail in her aunt's notes. "Dorothy really knew what she was doing," Mrs. Margaret remarked. "These instructions are more precise than any agriculture manual I've ever seen." While they were working, Mr. John appeared, offering more help. He brought some borrowed tools and offered to help prepare other cultivation areas. Sarah was beginning to feel that perhaps she could realize her plan. During the first few days of planting, everything went well. The seeds were of excellent quality and began to germinate quickly. Sarah spent hours tending to the seedlings, religiously following the notebook instructions. It was then that the pharmacist, Dr. Henry, showed up at the property unannounced. He arrived one afternoon when Sarah was watering the first seedlings, and she had no way to hide what she was doing. "So you decided to plant the seeds instead of selling them," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I hope you know what you're doing. Cultivating medicinal plants requires specific licenses." "Licenses?" Sarah stopped working, worried. "Of course. To cultivate plants with pharmacological properties, you need authorization from the proper authorities. Without it, you could face serious problems." Dr. Henry walked among the seedlings, examining them with interest. Sarah didn't know if he was telling the truth or just trying to scare her. She replied that she was just experimenting and that she would research the necessary licenses. "My offer of $5,000 still stands," said Dr. Henry. "In fact, seeing the progress you've already made, I can increase it to $6,000. It's a generous amount for someone in your situation." His insistence on buying everything confirmed for Sarah that the plants were far more valuable than he admitted. She politely declined the offer and said she wanted to try cultivating for a while longer. Dr. Henry left with a displeased expression, but not before making one final comment. "I hope you don't regret this decision, young lady. Sometimes it's better to accept a good offer than to risk losing everything." The veiled threat left Sarah even more determined to continue. She realized she was dealing with people who wouldn't take no for an answer easily, and that she would need to be even more cautious. That same week, Sarah received a visit from a man who introduced himself as Dr. Richard Foster, the businessman Professor Walter had mentioned. He was a tall, well-dressed man who arrived in a luxurious pickup truck, accompanied by 2 assistants. "I heard you recently inherited this land," said Dr. Richard with artificial cordiality. "I run a natural products company and am interested in buying properties in the region." Sarah received the group in front of the shack, trying to hide her nervousness. Nathan was in her lap, and the men seemed to be assessing both the property and her financial situation. "What would your offer be?" asked Sarah, curious to see how far they would go. "I can offer $20,000 for the entire plot," said Dr. Richard. "It's a fair price considering the state of the property and the location." The amount was significant for someone in Sarah's situation, but she had done some research and discovered that similar plots in the region were worth much more. Besides, if the plants she was cultivating succeeded, she could earn much more by keeping the property. "I need to think about your offer," replied Sarah. "Of course, but don't take too long. I have other plots in mind, and my offer may not last forever." Dr. Richard handed her an elegant business card. "Call me when you decide." After they left, Mrs. Margaret appeared, visibly worried. She had seen the pickup truck and recognized who the visitors were. "Dear, this Dr. Richard is not a good person," warned Mrs. Margaret. "Several families in the region have regretted selling land to him. He pays little and then makes fortunes from what he plants." "But $20,000 is a lot of money for me," Sarah admitted the temptation. "It may seem like a lot now, but if your plants grow as I expect, you could earn that in a few months by selling the harvest. Be patient." During the following weeks, Sarah dedicated herself entirely to cultivation. The seedlings were growing exceptionally well, even better than the instructions in the notebooks predicted. The soil truly seemed to have special properties. She established a routine. She woke up early to tend to the plants before the intense heat, spent the afternoons reading her aunt's notebooks to learn more techniques, and worked again in the late afternoon when the sun was less intense. Nathan was developing well despite the simple conditions they lived in. Mrs. Margaret brought some baby clothes she had saved and helped Sarah better organize the space in the shack. Mr. John installed a kerosene lamp so she could have light at night. The growth of the plants drew attention even from a distance. Some varieties had leaves with unique colors and shapes, and others emitted striking fragrances. Sarah had to install an improvised fence around the cultivation area to protect the seedlings. It was then that the problems began to intensify. One morning, Sarah discovered that several seedlings had been trampled during the night. The footprints showed that someone had entered the property on purpose to destroy part of the crop. Sarah was devastated seeing weeks of work destroyed. Some of the trampled plants were unique varieties she might not be able to replant. She decided she needed to take measures to protect what remained. Mr. John suggested they take turns keeping watch at night. He offered to stay a few nights a week guarding the property, and Sarah would take the others. It was a risky arrangement, but it seemed to be the only option. On the first night Mr. John kept watch. He managed to scare off 2 men who were trying to enter the property. They fled when they realized someone was watching, but they would certainly return. Sarah decided to document everything. She photographed the damage to the plants, noted the times of the attempted break-ins, and began keeping a record of all incidents. Professor Walter advised her to do this in case she needed to involve the authorities. The situation grew more tense when Sarah received an official visit. 2 men introduced themselves as agriculture inspectors and claimed they had received a complaint about irregular cultivation of medicinal plants on her property. "Do you have the necessary licenses for this type of cultivation?" asked the taller inspector, examining the plants. Sarah explained she was only experimenting with planting seeds inherited from her family, but the men insisted she needed specific documentation. "Can you show me your identification and explain exactly what licenses are required?" asked Sarah, following the advice Professor Walter had given. The men exchanged glances and began giving vague answers. Sarah sensed something wasn't right and asked to see the official documents proving their authority. "We don't need to show documents to conduct inspections," said the shorter inspector aggressively. "You have 1 week to regularize the situation, or we will confiscate everything." After they left, Sarah sought out Professor Walter to find out if that visit was legitimate. He made a few calls and discovered no official inspection had been scheduled for the region. "They were people hired to intimidate you," concluded Professor Walter. "It's a common tactic. They hope you'll get scared and agree to sell cheap." Sarah was beginning to understand she was facing unscrupulous people who would do anything to get what they wanted. She needed legal help, but didn't have money to pay a lawyer. Professor Walter suggested she seek out the public defender's office in the neighboring town. He offered to look after Nathan while she made the trip, as it would take a full day. The trip to the neighboring town was revealing. The public defender, Dr. Paul, listened attentively to Sarah's story and confirmed she was being victimized by intimidation. "This type of situation is more common than you think," said Dr. Paul. "Unscrupulous business people use pressure tactics to force vulnerable people to sell valuable properties at low prices." He explained Sarah's rights as a property owner and offered to represent her free of charge. He also gave specific guidance on how to proceed if she was visited again by the fake inspectors. "Your land documentation is in order, and you have the right to plant whatever you want on your property, as long as it's nothing illegal," reassured Dr. Paul. Sarah returned to Golden Ridge feeling more confident and prepared to face the next intimidations. She followed the lawyer's advice and installed a small used recorder she managed to buy to document future visits. The plants continued to grow well despite the problems. Sarah estimated that in another 2 weeks she would have the first harvest of some varieties. She began researching potential buyers who would pay fair prices. It was Mr. John who suggested she participate in the regional fair held monthly in the neighboring town. It was an event where small producers sold directly to consumers, without intermediaries. "The fair is on a Saturday and you can rent a booth for a low price," explained Mr. John. "There you'll meet other producers and maybe make interesting contacts." Sarah liked the idea because it would allow her to test the market before making bigger decisions about production. She decided to wait one more week to have enough products to take to the fair. During that week of waiting, she had 2 more intimidating visits. Dr. Henry returned offering $8,000 for the remaining seeds, and Dr. Richard Foster raised his offer to $30,000 for the entire plot. Both seemed more anxious and insistent. "You're being very stubborn, young lady," said Dr. Henry during his second visit. "This planting business could go wrong and you could lose everything. My offer is guaranteed money in hand." Sarah refused again, but realized the pressure was mounting. They knew she was close to her first harvest and wanted to stop her from discovering the real value of the plants. On the night before the fair, Sarah carefully harvested her first medicinal plants. She followed exactly the instructions from her aunt's notebooks on how to dry and prepare each variety. The result was better than she expected. The plants had vibrant colors, intense fragrances, and an appearance far superior to what she usually saw in stores. Sarah prepared small packages of each variety, with labels explaining the properties and methods of use based on her aunt's notebooks. On the Saturday of the fair, Mr. John lent his small pickup truck to take Sarah and the products. Mrs. Margaret also came along to help with sales and look after Nathan while Sarah attended to customers. The fair took place in a large square in the neighboring town. There were stalls selling everything: fruits, vegetables, cheeses, homemade sweets, crafts and plants. Sarah set up her stall in an area designated for medicinal products. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out now. Continuing. In the very first hours, Sarah's stall began to attract attention. The plants she had brought were visibly superior in quality to those sold by other producers. Several people stopped to examine the products and ask questions. Sarah had studied her aunt's notebooks so much that she could explain in detail the properties of each plant. Her knowledge impressed even other experienced vendors at the fair. "Where did you get these plants?" asked a lady who had been selling herbs for 20 years. "I've never seen some of these varieties around here." Sarah explained that she had inherited old family seeds and was trying to revive traditional cultivation. The story sparked even more interest, and soon there was a small crowd around her stall. A man who introduced himself as Dr. Frank, a researcher from the Federal University, was particularly interested. He examined the plants with scientific knowledge and asked several technical questions. "These plants have characteristics I haven't seen in years," said Dr. Frank. "It seems they are old varieties that were preserved very carefully. Would you be interested in participating in a research program?" The proposal was intriguing, but Sarah decided not to commit immediately. She was learning to be cautious with offers that seemed too good to be true. During the day, Sarah sold all her produce and even received orders for the next fair. The prices she managed to charge were 5 times higher than those offered by Dr. Henry, confirming she had made the right decision. An important discovery happened when Sarah spoke with other small producers in the region. Several of them had faced pressures similar to what she was experiencing, and some regretted having sold their land. "I had unique medicinal plants on my property," recounted an older man named Joseph. "I sold it to that Dr. Richard Foster for $15,000, thinking it was a good deal. Later I found out he's making over $100,000 a year from my old plantation." Stories like this made Sarah realize she was facing an organized scheme to acquire valuable properties at low prices. She decided to document everything and perhaps seek out other landowners who were going through the same situation. Back in Golden Ridge, Sarah was euphoric with the success of the market. She had earned more money in one day than she had seen in months, and on top of that, she had created a network of interesting contacts. Mr. John and Mrs. Margaret were equally excited. They suggested that Sarah expand her cultivation to have enough products to participate in all the regional markets. "With the money you earn today, you can buy seeds, better tools, and even hire help," calculated Mr. John. Sarah agreed, but she knew she first needed to solve the security problems. It was no use expanding production if she continued to be sabotaged every week. She decided to use part of the market money to install better fences, and maybe even some trail cameras to identify who was trespassing on her property. Dr. Paul had said photographic evidence would be useful for prosecuting those responsible. During the following week, Sarah worked on expanding the cultivation. She prepared new areas, planted more varieties, and organized the irrigation system better. The plants were growing even more vigorously than before. It was then that she discovered something new in the cistern. Exploring more deeply, Sarah found a second chamber that had gone unnoticed initially. In this chamber were larger jars containing different substances, powders, extracts, and even what appeared to be already processed plants. One of the jars contained a golden powder with a very distinctive smell. Her aunt's notes indicated that this substance was extremely valuable and should be used only in small quantities. Sarah wasn't sure what it was, but she carefully stored it away to research. Professor Walter helped her find information about the golden substance. After much searching, they discovered it was a rare natural compound used in the manufacture of expensive medicines for specific diseases. "If this is really what I think it is, a small amount is worth thousands of dollars," said Professor Walter, impressed. "Your aunt really knew what she was doing." The discovery made Sarah completely understand why so many people were interested in her property. It wasn't just for the common plants, but because they knew or suspected the existence of rare substances like that one. She decided to keep the new discovery a secret until she better understood her legal situation. Sarah searched for more information online and discovered the substance had scientifically proven pharmacological value. During her research, Sarah found articles about biopiracy and theft of traditional knowledge. She began to suspect that the attempts to buy her land were part of a larger scheme to appropriate ancestral knowledge. The confirmation came in a casual conversation with Mrs. Margaret. The lady revealed that Aunt Dorothy always said she kept Indian remedies and that they were pieces of knowledge that could not fall into the wrong hands. Dorothy once said she learned many recipes from a very old Indian woman who died many years ago, recounted Mrs. Margaret. It was knowledge from centuries, passed down from generation to generation. Sarah realized she was dealing with cultural and scientific heritage of inestimable value. The attempts at intimidation and purchase made even less sense now that she understood the true scale of what she possessed. She decided to seek out organizations that protected traditional knowledge and the intellectual property of indigenous communities. Online, she found specialized NGOs and made contact, explaining her situation. The response was quick and encouraging. A lawyer specializing in indigenous intellectual property rights, Dr. Marcia, became interested in the case and offered free guidance. "If there truly is traditional indigenous knowledge involved, you may have special protection rights," explained Dr. Marcia during a phone call, "and anyone trying to appropriate it improperly could face serious legal consequences." Sarah sent photos of the notebooks and the substances for analysis. Dr. Marcia promised to research and get back with specific guidance on how to legally protect her heritage. While waiting for the response, Sarah continued cultivating and selling at the regional fair. Her reputation was growing rapidly, and she began receiving orders from clients in other cities. The researcher, Dr. Frank, came looking for her again, this time with a more concrete proposal. He wanted to include Sarah's plants in a university study on rare medicinal varieties, offering financial compensation for her participation. The study could help scientifically document the plant's value and protect this knowledge for the future, explained Dr. Frank. Sarah was interested in the proposal, but decided to consult Dr. Marcia before accepting anything. She was learning that she needed to be careful with contracts and partnerships. During this period of growth, the sabotage attempts intensified. In 1 week, Sarah had plants uprooted 3 times. It was obvious someone was getting desperate to stop her success. Mr. John managed to install some camera traps borrowed from a hunter friend. On the first night of operation, they captured clear images of 2 men destroying the plants. Sarah recognized one of them. He was one of the assistants who had accompanied Dr. Richard Foster on the initial visit. She finally had concrete evidence of who was behind the sabotage. She took the photos to Dr. Paul, who was outraged by the evidence of vandalism. He said it was possible to sue those responsible for property damage and intimidation. "Now we have enough evidence to file a police report and request protective measures," said Dr. Paul. "They can't keep doing this with impunity." Sarah authorized Dr. Paul to take all appropriate legal measures. It was time to go on the offensive instead of just defending. The antagonist's reaction was swift. 2 days after Sarah filed the police report, she received an intimidating visit from lawyers representing Dr. Richard Foster. The lawyers claimed Sarah was committing defamation by accusing Dr. Richard Foster of sabotage. They demanded she withdraw the accusations and threatened a lawsuit for moral damages. "Our client is harming the reputation of a respected businessman with unfounded accusations," said the lead lawyer. Sarah stood firm and said she had photographic evidence. The lawyers claimed the photos could have been forged and that they proved nothing against their client. Dr. Paul advised Sarah not to be intimidated. He said legal intimidation tactics were common in this type of situation and that she had rights that would be defended. The situation escalated when Sarah received a legal notification claiming she was committing biopiracy by cultivating plants without proper authorization. The lawsuit demanded she stop the cultivation immediately. Sarah was frightened by the seriousness of the accusation, but Dr. Marcia reassured her by explaining that the lawsuit was legally weak. "They're trying to use the biopiracy law against you, but that law protects traditional knowledge. It doesn't attack it," explained Dr. Marcia. "It's a desperate attempt at intimidation." Dr. Marcia offered to defend Sarah pro bono, considering the case's importance for the protection of traditional knowledge. "Let's counterattack by claiming that they are the ones trying to commit biopiracy by attempting to appropriate ancient indigenous knowledge," proposed Dr. Marcia. The defense strategy would be to transform Sarah from accused to victim, showing that she was legitimately protecting a cultural heritage that others were trying to steal. During the preparation of the defense, Sarah discovered more information about the scheme she was facing. Dr. Richard Foster had a company that patented compounds derived from medicinal plants, profiting from traditional knowledge. Professor Walter found records showing that Dr. Richard Foster's company had already patented several substances discovered on rural properties he had bought in the region. "It's a clear pattern," said Professor Walter. "He buys land with medicinal plants for low prices, studies their properties, registers patents, and makes millions." This discovery strengthened Sarah's case. Dr. Marcia said there were legal precedents for invalidating patents based on the biopiracy of traditional knowledge. As the legal battle unfolded, Sarah continued expanding her cultivation. She had learned to be more cautious and had installed more sophisticated security systems. The growth of her business was attracting positive attention, too. Other small producers approached her interested in forming partnerships, and Sarah began considering creating a cooperative. Mrs. Margaret suggested that she look for other descendants of people who had learned from ancient healers. Together they could share knowledge and strengthen everyone's position against exploitation. The search revealed there were 3 other families in the region who possessed knowledge similar to Sarah's. All had faced pressure to sell their properties or share their recipes. The group decided to formally unite, creating an association of traditional medicinal plant producers. The union would give them more political and legal strength to resist the pressures. Dr. Frank, the university researcher, proposed that the association form an official partnership with the university. This would give the group scientific legitimacy and institutional protection. The university can officially document the traditional knowledge and help protect it from misappropriation, explained Dr. Frank. Sarah liked the proposal, but insisted on conditions that protected the producers' rights to their knowledge. Any research should benefit the original communities. The partnership with the university had an unexpected effect. It caught the attention of specialized media. A sustainable agriculture magazine decided to do a story on the project. The story highlighted Sarah's struggle to protect ancestral knowledge against corporate biopiracy. The story generated public sympathy and support from environmental organizations. The media impact forced Dr. Richard Foster to partially retreat. His lawyers withdrew some of the more absurd accusations against Sarah, trying to avoid more negative exposure. However, the economic pressure continued. Dr. Richard Foster began offering very high prices for plants similar to Sarah's, trying to create unfair competition. Sarah realized she needed to professionalize her operation even more to compete. She used her growing profits to invest in better equipment and expand the cultivated area. The turning point happened when Sarah discovered that a large international pharmaceutical company was interested in her plants. They offered a long-term supply contract with very attractive terms. The offer was tempting, but Sarah remembered the warnings about biopiracy. She decided to negotiate carefully, demanding that any contract acknowledge the traditional origin of the knowledge. Dr. Marcia helped her review the proposed contract. There were several problematic clauses that could result in the loss of rights to the plants and knowledge. "They want you to sign an exclusive transfer of all knowledge related to the plants," warned Dr. Marcia. "That would be like selling your soul." Sarah refused the original contract and presented a counter-proposal. She would provide the plants, but retain all rights to the traditional knowledge involved. The negotiations lasted for months, with back-and-forth proposals. Sarah was learning that large companies always tried to obtain more rights than they offered in return. During this period, she received unexpected support from indigenous organizations that took an interest in her case. They saw in Sarah's struggle an opportunity to establish important legal precedents. "Your case could help protect the traditional knowledge of all communities," explained an indigenous representative during a meeting. The support from the indigenous organizations gave Sarah access to specialized lawyers and legal resources she wouldn't have had alone. The struggle became bigger than her personal situation. The pharmaceutical company finally accepted a modified version of the contract that protected Sarah's rights. She could supply plants without ceding the associated traditional knowledge. The contract provided for substantial payments over a 5-year period, with the possibility of renewal. Sarah would finally have the financial security she so needed. However, signing the contract brought new challenges. Sarah would need to significantly increase her production to meet the agreed-upon targets. She decided to expand partnerships with other producers in the region, offering seeds and knowledge in exchange for supply commitments. It would be a way to benefit the entire community. Mr. John was one of the first to accept the partnership. He converted part of his property to cultivate the medicinal plants, following Sarah's guidance. Mrs. Margaret, despite her age, also wanted to participate. She would contribute her knowledge about processing and drying the plants, in addition to helping cultivate smaller varieties. Within a few months, Sarah had created a network of producers covering the entire region. The project was generating income for several families and preserving knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. The project's success caught the attention of government authorities. Sarah was invited to present her experience at seminars on sustainable rural development. During one of these presentations, she learned about other similar projects in other regions of the country. She realized her struggle was not isolated and that there was a growing network of people defending traditional knowledge. One of the most important contacts was with a cooperative in the Northeast that also worked with medicinal plants. They proposed an exchange of knowledge and seeds that could benefit both projects. Sarah accepted the exchange proposal. She would send some of her unique varieties in exchange for plants adapted to the northeastern climate that could grow well in Kentucky. The exchange was successful and opened possibilities to expand production with new varieties. Sarah was constantly learning and developing her expertise. During this period of growth, she needed to make an important decision about Nathan. The boy was growing up and would soon need formal education. Sarah considered moving to a larger city where Nathan would have access to better schools, but realized that would mean abandoning the project she had built. Mrs. Margaret suggested an alternative: create a rural school in the region itself that could serve not only Nathan but other local children. The medicinal plant project was generating resources that could make the school viable. The idea of creating a rural school excited Sarah. It would be a way to give back to the community that had supported her and ensure that Nathan grew up close to the project that had changed their lives. She began researching rural education and discovered there were government programs supporting educational initiatives in rural communities. Professor Walter offered to help with the school's pedagogical project. His experience in education would be fundamental to creating a teaching program suited to local needs. The school proposal received enthusiastic support from the community. Several families had children who needed to travel long distances to study. and a local school would solve this problem. Sarah decided to dedicate part of the profits from the pharmaceutical contract to make the school viable. It would be a long-term investment in the future of the region and the next generations. During the school planning, Sarah reflected on her journey. In just over a year, she had gone from absolute poverty to becoming a respected businesswoman and community leader. The transformation had not been merely financial. Sarah had developed confidence, knowledge, and a network of relationships that strengthened her in all areas of life. Nathan was growing up healthy and happy, surrounded by people who had become chosen family. The boy played among the plants that had changed their lives, not yet knowing the importance of that environment to his story. Mrs. Margaret often commented on how proud Aunt Dorothy would be if she could see what Sarah had accomplished. It was as if the knowledge kept in the cistern had finally found its true heir. Mr. John had become a close partner and a father figure to Nathan. His life experience and practical wisdom perfectly complemented Sarah's enthusiasm and determination. Professor Walter carefully documented the entire development of the project. He believed Sarah's experience could serve as a model for other communities facing similar situations. Dr. Marcia continued overseeing the legal aspects of the project, ensuring all contracts and partnerships adequately protected the community's rights. The legal battle against Dr. Richard Foster had ended with an out-of-court settlement. He gave up his attempts to acquire Sarah's land in exchange for her not suing his company for attempted biopiracy. Dr. Henry, the pharmacist, also changed his stance. Realizing he wouldn't obtain the plants through intimidation, he approached Sarah, proposing a legitimate business partnership. Sarah considered Dr. Henry's proposal, but established strict conditions. Any partnership would have to respect the principles of fair trade she had established. Sarah's reputation as a producer of high-quality medicinal plants had spread far beyond the region. She received inquiries from buyers in various states interested in her products. The growth in demand required Sarah to develop criteria for selecting commercial partners. She prioritized companies that demonstrated a commitment to ethical and sustainable practices. One of the most significant contracts was with a pharmacy chain specializing in natural products. They offered national distribution for Sarah's plants. The partnership with the pharmacy chain required Sarah to standardize her production processes and obtain quality certifications. It was a significant investment, but necessary for growth. During this professionalization process, Sarah never lost sight of her roots and values. She maintained her commitment to benefit the local community and preserve traditional knowledge. The rural school finally began operating in a new building, constructed on the land adjacent to Sarah's. The first class had 15 students, including Nathan, who was now 3 years old. Professor Walter was the first principal of the school, implementing a curriculum that combined formal education with traditional knowledge about agriculture and medicinal plants. Sarah frequently gave practical lessons to the children, teaching about cultivation, plant properties, and the importance of preserving ancestral knowledge. The school became a model of rural education that attracted attention from educators in other regions. Delegations regularly visited to learn about the experience and replicate it in their communities. One of the most innovative aspects of the school was the integration between education and production. The children learned mathematics by calculating crop yields, science by studying plant properties, and history through local traditions. The educational project received official recognition when it won a national award for innovation in rural education. Sarah was invited to receive the award in the federal capital. The trip to receive the award was the first time Sarah left Kentucky. She took Nathan and some community representatives to the event in Washington, D.C. During the award ceremony, Sarah had the opportunity to present her project to educational authorities and representatives of international organizations. The national recognition brought new partnership and funding opportunities. Sarah received proposals to expand the school model to other regions. She decided to accept some proposals selectively, always maintaining the commitment to the principles that had guided her original project. The expansion of the educational project required Sarah to develop her leadership and management capacity. She took courses in administration and community leadership. During one of these courses, Sarah met other women who had faced similar challenges in their communities. They formed an informal network of mutual support. The network of women community leaders became an important source of experience exchange and joint project development. Sarah learned a lot from the experiences of the others. One of the most significant joint projects was a marketing cooperative that allowed rural communities to sell their products directly in urban markets. The marketing cooperative broke several barriers that prevented small producers from accessing profitable markets. Sarah became one of the main coordinators of the initiative. The success of the cooperative caught the attention of international organizations working with rural development. Sarah was invited to participate in international conferences. During a conference in Canada, Sarah presented her experience to representatives from various countries in Latin America. Her project was recognized as a model of sustainable development. The international recognition brought opportunities for collaboration with similar projects in other countries. Sarah began receiving invitations for international consultancies. She accepted some international consultancy projects, always careful not to stray too far from her community and original project. The international experiences enriched Sarah's perspective on community development. She brought new ideas that were adapted to the local reality. One of the most successful innovations was a rural tourism program that allowed visitors to learn about the Medicinal Plants Project and the rural school. Rural tourism became an additional source of income for the community and a way to share traditional knowledge with a broader audience. Visitors came from various regions of the country and even from abroad to see Sarah's project. Many were inspired to start similar projects in their own communities. During one of these visits, Sarah met a documentary filmmaker who became interested in making a film about her story. He proposed documenting not only the present, but reconstructing the entire journey from the beginning. Sarah was hesitant about exposing her personal story, but realized the documentary could inspire others in similar situations. She agreed to participate in the documentary on the condition that it focused not only on her personal story, but on the collective work that had transformed the entire community. Filming lasted several months, documenting the project's daily life, interviewing community members, and reconstructing the most important moments of the journey. The documentary premiered at film festivals and received several awards for its sensitive and inspiring approach to themes like rural development and cultural preservation. The documentary's impact brought even more visibility to Sarah's project. She began receiving invitations to speak at universities and organizations. During a lecture at a university in Chicago, Sarah was approached by students interested in internships and research within the project. She decided to formalize an internship program that allowed students from various fields to contribute to the project while learning about rural development. The internship program brought new perspectives and technical knowledge that helped improve various aspects of the project. One of the most significant contributions was a computerized management system developed by engineering students that optimized production and sales control. Biology students developed research on the pharmacological properties of the plants, resulting in important scientific publications. The scientific publications further strengthened Sarah's position in the debate on protecting traditional knowledge. She was invited to participate in governmental commissions that were drafting public policies for family farming and the preservation of traditional knowledge. Participation in public policy allowed Sarah to influence decisions affecting communities similar to hers across the country. One of the most important milestones was the approval of a law that facilitated the registration and protection of traditional knowledge associated with medicinal plants. Sarah played an active role in drafting this law, contributing her practical experience to make the legislation more effective. The new law created protection mechanisms that benefited not only Sarah's project, but several other communities preserving traditional knowledge. During this period of involvement with public policy, Sarah did not lose focus on her local project. She always returned to the community to apply what she learned in other spheres. Nathan was growing up immersed in this environment of community development and social awareness. By age 5, he was already showing interest in the technical aspects of cultivation. The rural school had expanded and now served children through complete elementary education. Many families had moved to the region specifically to have access to the school. Population growth brought new challenges, but also opportunities. Demand for local services grew, creating jobs in various areas. Sarah helped organize cooperatives for products beyond medicinal plants, dairy, baking, crafts, and diversified family farming. The region transformed into a model of integrated rural development that attracted the attention of researchers and public managers. During a national conference on sustainable development, Sarah was honored as one of the most influential leaders in the transformation of rural United States. The tribute recognized not only her personal achievements, but the collective impact her project had generated on public policies and other similar initiatives. Sarah used the visibility from the tribute to launch a foundation dedicated to supporting rural development projects based on traditional knowledge. The Dorothy Foundation, named in honor of the aunt who had made everything possible, began supporting projects in various regions of the country. One of the first projects supported by the foundation was in a Quilombola community that preserved ancestral knowledge about medicinal plants. Sarah personally visited the Quilombola project and was impressed by the similarities and differences compared to her own experience. The exchange of experiences between different communities became a hallmark of the foundation, promoting the preservation and appreciation of Brazilian cultural diversity. During one of these visits, Sarah had an important revelation about the future of Nathan and the project she had built. She realized that Nathan was growing up with a unique perspective on sustainable development and cultural preservation, which would be valuable for the project's future. Sarah decided she would not pressure Nathan to follow in her footsteps, but would create opportunities for him to develop his own interests within the context of the family project. Nathan showed a special aptitude for the technical and scientific aspects of cultivation, but also an interest in the social and educational dimension of the project. At 7 years old, he was already helping Sarah with presentations, explaining to visitors how some of the simpler aspects of cultivation worked. Nathan's natural ease with both the plants and the people impressed visitors, and suggested he had inherited some of the special skills Sarah had developed. During a visit by foreign researchers, Nathan asked technical questions about botany that surprised the academics with their sophistication. Sarah realized that Nathan was absorbing knowledge much faster and more deeply than she had imagined. She decided to create structured opportunities for Nathan to develop his interests, including special courses and mentorship with experts. One of the most important mentors was Dr. Frank, the researcher who had been one of the first to recognize the scientific value of Sarah's plants. Dr. Frank offered to guide Nathan in adapted scientific initiation projects suitable for his age as part of an early science education program. The early scientific initiation program became another innovative aspect of the rural school, attracting interest from educators specialized in science teaching. Sarah was proud to see that the project continued to evolve and create new educational possibilities for Nathan and other children in the community. During a 10-year project evaluation meeting, Sarah reflected on the entire journey since that first difficult night in the abandoned shack. The transformation had been complete. From a desperate young woman with no prospects, she had become a nationally recognized leader in sustainable rural development. But what mattered most to Sarah was not the external recognition, but the transformation that had occurred in the community and in the lives of people like Mr. John and Mrs. Margaret. Mr. John, now 75, had become the production coordinator of the cooperative and a respected mentor for younger producers. Mrs. Margaret, despite being 80, remained active as a consultant in plant processing and was a living library of traditional knowledge. The rural school had graduated its first high school class, and several of the graduates had chosen to pursue higher education related to rural development or agricultural sciences. Some former students of the school were returning to the community after university, bringing new knowledge that further enriched the project. Generational continuity was being ensured naturally, without imposition, through example and the creation of attractive opportunities for young people. During a high school graduation ceremony, Sarah was invited to be the class speaker and gave an emotional speech about persistence and faith in the future. When I arrived here 10 years ago, I had nothing but a baby, an old suitcase, and an inheritance I didn't even understand, said Sarah. Today, we have a thriving community and a promising future for our children. Sarah's speech was widely shared and became an inspiration for other communities facing similar challenges. One of the graduating students, Mr. John's daughter, had been accepted into a federal university to study agricultural engineering with a focus on medicinal plants. Sarah offered to fund the girl's studies through the foundation, ensuring she could return to the community with advanced knowledge. Initiatives like this ensured that the knowledge developed in the community would not be lost, but would continue to evolve through new generations. During the project's 11th year, Sarah faced her greatest challenge yet. A large multinational corporation tried to patent some of the formulations developed in her community. The patent attempt represented exactly the type of biopiracy Sarah had fought against from the beginning. Dr. Marcia, now specialized in biopiracy cases, took on the legal defense and managed to block the patent registrations. The legal victory set important precedents for protecting traditional knowledge from corporate appropriation. The case received international attention and further strengthened Sarah's position as a defender of traditional communities' rights. During a UN conference on Indigenous rights and traditional knowledge, Sarah presented her case as an example of successful resistance. The UN presentation resulted in invitations to collaborate on international traditional knowledge protection projects. Sarah accepted some international collaborations, always careful to ensure they did not interfere with her commitment to the local community. One of the most significant collaborations was with indigenous communities in Costa Rica, facing similar pressures from multinational corporations. The exchange of experiences with the Costa Rican communities enriched Sarah's legal defense strategies and organizational resistance. She brought community organizing techniques learned in Costa Rica back to the United States, adapting them to the local reality. During this phase of international expansion, Nathan turned 10 and began to show a more structured interest in the scientific and social aspects of the project. He participated as a junior assistant in some of the community's research, showing a special aptitude for data analysis. Sarah began to envision the possibility that Nathan could effectively continue and expand the work she had started. However, she remained committed to not pressuring Nathan, creating only opportunities for him to develop his own interests. During the project's 12th year, Sarah made an important decision. It was time to systematize all the knowledge developed in the community. She initiated a comprehensive documentation project that would record not only the cultivation techniques, but also the social and cultural history of the community's transformation. The documentation project involved anthropologists, historians, biologists, and educators, creating a unique multidisciplinary record. The documentation would result in a series of academic and popular publications that would preserve the knowledge for future generations. Professor Walter coordinated the educational aspects of the documentation, creating teaching materials that could be used in other communities. Mrs. Margaret was one of the main collaborators, contributing oral accounts that preserved cultural aspects that might otherwise have been lost. Mr. John meticulously documented the agricultural techniques developed over the years, creating practical manuals for other producers. The documentation revealed that the community had developed technical and social innovations that held scientific value beyond their local importance. Some of the techniques developed in the community began to be studied at universities as possible solutions for rural development problems. Sarah was proud to realize that her community had become not only an example of success, but also a source of knowledge for others. During the 13th year, Sarah faced a difficult decision about proposals to significantly expand the project. Several organizations offered substantial funding to replicate the model in dozens of other communities. The proposal was tempting because it would multiply the project's impact, but Sarah was worried about the possibility of losing the original quality and values. She decided to accept a gradual and controlled expansion, prioritizing quality over quantity. The chosen expansion model included an extensive period of preparation and follow-up for each new community. Sarah and her team spent a year developing knowledge transfer methodologies that preserved the essence of the original project. The first replica of the project was implemented in a community in the northeastern backlands, adapting the techniques for the semi-arid climate. Sarah personally oversaw the implementation in the northeast, learning about the necessary adaptations for different contexts. The northeastern experience revealed that the project's principles were universalizable, but the techniques needed to be adapted to each reality. Sarah decided that future expansions would always include a period of local adaptation before full implementation. During the 14th year, Nathan made a choice that surprised Sarah. He wanted to study biotechnology with a focus on medicinal plants. Nathan's choice represented a natural evolution of the project, combining traditional knowledge with advanced technologies. Sarah fully supported Nathan's decision, seeing in it the possibility of taking the project to a new scientific level. Nathan began preparatory studies to enter one of the country's best universities in biotechnology. His preparation included advanced research within the community itself, guided by researchers collaborating with the project. During this period, Nathan developed a scientific initiation project that analyzed the genetic properties of the plants cultivated in the community. The results of Nathan's research scientifically confirmed many of the empirical observations the community had developed over the years. Sarah was moved to see that Nathan was building bridges between the traditional knowledge she had preserved and modern science. Nathan's research caught the attention of international universities, which offered scholarships for undergraduate studies abroad. Sarah faced the dilemma of supporting an extraordinary opportunity for Nathan that would mean several years of separation. After much reflection, she concluded that she should support Nathan's aspirations, even if it meant personal sacrifices. Nathan accepted a scholarship to study biotechnology at a Canadian university specializing in medicinal plants. The farewell was difficult, but Sarah was proud to see Nathan leaving to broaden his academic horizons. Nathan committed to returning to the community during vacations and to developing his undergraduate thesis based on the family's plants. During the 15th year, Sarah focused on consolidating the project so it could function well even with her eventual reduction in direct involvement. She developed management structures that would allow the community to maintain autonomy even if she needed to dedicate herself to other activities. The institutionalization process included creating community councils with representation from all involved families. Sarah also established reserve funds that would guarantee the project's financial sustainability for several years. During this period, she received several offers to take on positions in national and international organizations. One of the most attractive proposals was to lead a national rural development program based on traditional knowledge. Sarah seriously considered the proposal, seeing in it an opportunity to influence public policy on a national scale. However, she decided that her priority remained the community that had become her family. Sarah accepted a modified version of the position that would allow her to work primarily remotely, maintaining her base in the community. The new position gave Sarah an even larger platform to advocate for the principles guiding her work. During the 16th year, Nathan returned from Canada with a revolutionary research project developed during his studies. He had created genetic analysis techniques that could accelerate the development of new medicinal varieties. Nathan's techniques perfectly combined traditional knowledge with advanced technology, achieving the synthesis Sarah had always dreamed of. Nathan proposed implementing a biotechnology laboratory in the community that would serve as a regional research center. Sarah enthusiastically supported the proposal, seeing in it the natural evolution of the project into a new phase. Nathan's laboratory attracted partnerships with universities and companies that brought additional resources to the community. During the 17th year, the biotechnology laboratory began producing significant results. Nathan developed improved varieties of some plants that maintained medicinal properties but grew better in different climates. Nathan's innovations allowed the cultivation to expand to regions previously unsuitable, multiplying the project's reach. Sarah felt proud to see that Nathan had found his own way to contribute to the family legacy. During an official laboratory inauguration ceremony, Sarah reflected on the 18 years that had passed since her desperate arrival in the community. The transformation had been complete. From a seemingly worthless inheritance, a project benefiting hundreds of families had emerged. Nathan, now a respected young scientist, represented the continuity and evolution of the project for the future. The rural school had become a national reference in education, integrated with community development. The producers' cooperative served markets across the country and had established international partnerships. The foundation supported similar projects in all regions of the United States and some neighboring countries. Mrs. Margaret, now 85 but still active, was recognized as a living treasure of traditional knowledge. Mr. John had become the community's unofficial historian, documenting each stage of the transformation. Professor Walter had developed educational methodologies that were being adopted in hundreds of rural schools. Dr. Marcia had become one of the country's leading specialists in the protection of traditional knowledge. All the project's original collaborators had found professional and personal fulfillment through their involvement with the initiative. During the ceremony, Sarah was honored with an honorary doctorate degree from a federal university. The tribute recognized not only her practical achievements, but her contribution to knowledge about sustainable rural development. Sarah used her acceptance speech to thank the community that had made everything possible. "I did not build this project alone," said an emotional Sarah. "Every person in this community contributed to transforming a vacant lot into a source of hope and prosperity." Sarah's speech was broadcast nationally and became an inspiration for social entrepreneurs across the country. After the ceremony, Sarah announced her decision to gradually reduce her operational involvement in the project. She would remain as honorary chair of the foundation, but would pass the day-to-day management to a new generation of leaders. Nathan would assume the scientific coordination of the project, while other young people trained by the rural school would take on other responsibilities. Sarah planned to dedicate more time to advocacy activities at the national and international level. She also wanted more time to watch Nathan grow up and perhaps start her own family in the future. During the 18th year, Sarah married Dr. Frank, the researcher who had been one of the first to believe in her project's potential. The marriage represented not only a personal fulfillment, but also a partnership that would strengthen the scientific aspects of the project. Dr. Frank brought academic connections that opened new possibilities for research and development. Nathan was happy about the marriage, seeing in Dr. Frank a mentor and father figure that had been absent from his life. The blending of the families created an even stronger foundation for the project's continuity through the generations. During the 19th year, Sarah and Frank had their first daughter together, a girl they named Dorothy, in honor of the aunt who had made everything possible. Little Dorothy was born into a world very different from the one Sarah had faced 19 years earlier. Instead of poverty and hopelessness, she was born into a prosperous community and an established project. Nathan, now 19 and a doctoral student, became a loving and protective older brother. Sarah often reflected on how life had been completely transformed through perseverance and community. During the project's 20th year, the community organized a grand celebration to commemorate 2 decades of transformation. The celebration brought together hundreds of people who had been impacted by the project over the years. Government officials, international academics, and representatives from similar communities attended the event. Sarah was honored with a statue installed in the community's central square. The statue depicted her holding baby Nathan in one hand and seeds in the other, symbolizing hope and growth. During her speech at the celebration, Sarah gave an emotional reflection on the journey. 20 years ago, I arrived here with nothing, just my baby and an old suitcase, she said. Today, we have a community that is an example for the entire world. Sarah recounted how the discovery in the cistern had been just the beginning of a journey of much greater discoveries about human potential and community strength. She thanked every person who had contributed to the project, acknowledging that the success had been the result of collective effort. Nathan spoke representing the new generation, committing to continue developing the legacy left by his mother. Little Dorothy, now 1 year old, slept peacefully in Sarah's arms during the ceremonies. Mrs. Margaret, despite being 86, gave a moving speech about how she had witnessed the complete transformation of the region. Mr. John, now 81, recalled the early days when he helped Sarah plant the first seeds. Professor Walter presented impressive data on the educational impact of the project over 2 decades. Dr. Marcia spoke about how the case had influenced national legislation on the protection of traditional knowledge. Dr. Frank presented the scientific results of the project, showing how it had contributed to advancing knowledge about medicinal plants. Representatives from other communities that had replicated the model shared their success stories. The celebration lasted 3 days and included exhibitions, lectures, cultural presentations, and much fellowship. Sarah used the occasion to officially announce her transition to an advisory role in the project. She explained that she was confident in the ability of the new generation of leaders to continue the work. Nathan would be the new general coordinator of the project, supported by a council of alumni from the rural school. Sarah would remain involved through the foundation, but would reduce her operational responsibilities. The transition was met with sadness by the older members, but also with understanding and support. Everyone recognized that Sarah had dedicated 20 years of her life to the project and deserved more time for her family. During the months following the celebration, the transition happened gradually and harmoniously. Nathan demonstrated maturity and competence in his new role, honoring the trust Sarah had placed in him. The community continued to prosper under the new leadership, proving that the project had put down solid roots. Sarah used her newfound free time to write a book telling her complete story. The book would be a way to inspire other people facing difficult situations and to document the lessons learned. While writing, Sarah revisited every stage of the journey, from that first terrible night in the shack to the prosperous present. She realized that the most important discovery had not been the seeds in the cistern, but her own capacity to grow and lead. Sarah's book became a national bestseller and was translated into several languages. The book's proceeds were entirely allocated to expanding the project into other regions. Sarah began receiving invitations for international lectures based on the book. She accepted some invitations selectively, always prioritizing time with her family. During a lecture in Europe, Sarah met other women who had faced similar challenges. These connections resulted in an international network of women leaders in sustainable rural development. The network provided an exchange of experiences and mutual support that benefited projects in several countries. Sarah became one of the coordinators of this international network, further expanding her impact. During the 22nd year of the project, Sarah received a proposal to run for a national political office. The proposal was to run for the United States Senate on a platform of rural development and environmental protection. Sarah seriously considered the possibility, seeing in it an opportunity to influence public policy on a national scale. However, after consulting with her family and the community, she decided to decline the candidacy. Sarah concluded she could have more impact by continuing her direct work with communities than in partisan politics. The decision was respected by all, who recognized that Sarah had always prioritized substance over status. During the 23rd year, Nathan completed his doctorate and received offers from several international universities. He considered the offers, but decided to establish his academic career in the United States, maintaining his base in the community. Nathan created a graduate program in biotechnology applied to medicinal plants at the regional federal university. The program attracted students from across the country and established the region as a center of reference in the field. Sarah felt proud to see that Nathan had found a way to combine academic ambition with community commitment. The university offered Sarah a position as a visiting professor in the program created by Nathan. She accepted a limited version of the position that would allow her to teach about social aspects of rural development. Sarah's classes became very popular among students interested in applying academic knowledge in community contexts. During the 24th year, little Dorothy turned 5 and began to show interest in plants. Sarah watched with amusement as her daughter played among the crops, just as Nathan had done at the same age. Dorothy showed a natural curiosity about the properties of plants and loved to help with simple cultivation activities. Sarah wondered if Dorothy would also develop an interest in the family project, but she was determined not to push any specific direction. Frank had settled completely into the community and become a beloved father figure to Nathan. The family was complete and harmonious, providing Sarah the emotional stability she had sought all her life. During the 25th year of the project, the community organized a new major celebration. The celebration marked a quarter-century of transformation and consolidation of the project. Sarah used the occasion to take a comprehensive stock of everything that had been achieved. The project had directly benefited more than 1,000 families and indirectly thousands of others. The rural school had graduated hundreds of young people, many of whom had become leaders in their own communities. The producers' cooperative had become one of the largest in the state and a national reference. The biotechnology laboratory had developed dozens of improved varieties of medicinal plants. The foundation supported projects across the country and had expanded to neighboring countries. The techniques developed in the community were being used in hundreds of similar projects. The educational model had influenced national public policies on rural education. During the celebration, Sarah announced the creation of a permanent institute dedicated to the research and preservation of traditional knowledge. The institute would be housed in the community itself and would function as an international reference center. Nathan would be the scientific director of the institute, ensuring high-quality continuity. Sarah would assume the chairmanship of the board of directors, maintaining strategic involvement. The institute received financial support from international organizations and the federal government. During the following years, the institute established itself as a world-renowned center of excellence. Researchers from various countries came to study in the community and collaborate on the projects. Sarah remained involved through the institute, but with flexibility to dedicate time to her family. Dorothy was growing up in a unique environment, surrounded by knowledge, nature, and a loving community. At 10 years old, Dorothy already demonstrated aptitudes that combined characteristics of Sarah and Nathan. She had Nathan's scientific curiosity and Sarah's social sensitivity. Sarah watched her daughter's development with fascination, seeing in her the potential for a third generation of leadership. However, she maintained her commitment to allowing Dorothy to choose her own path. During the 30th year of the project, Sarah turned 54 years old. She reflected on how her life had been completely transformed since that desperate 24-year-old young woman. The Vacant lot had become a thriving community that was an international example. Nathan had established himself as a respected scientist and capable community leader. Dorothy was growing up in an environment of opportunities that Sarah could never have imagined. Frank continued to be a loving companion and partner in work. The community had become a large extended family that supported all its members. Mrs. Margaret, despite being 91 years old, remained active as a consultant and was revered as the community's matriarch. Mr. John had turned 86 and still mentored new producers. Professor Walter remained involved with the school, now as an emeritus director. All the project's pioneers had aged with dignity, seeing their efforts bear fruit beyond their expectations. During a 30th year review meeting, Sarah gave a final reflection on the project's meaning. "What we discovered in this soil was not just seeds," she said, "but the unlimited potential of human collaboration based on knowledge and mutual respect." Sarah explained that the most important lesson was that real social transformation required time, persistence, and collective commitment. She thanked once again everyone who had contributed to making that extraordinary transformation possible. Nathan spoke about future plans, which included international expansion and new scientific research. Dorothy, now 11 years old, gave a presentation about the plants she most enjoyed studying. Frank presented scientific results, showing the global impact of the discoveries made in the community. During the meeting, Sarah announced she had decided to write a second book focused on lessons in community leadership. The second book would be more technical, aimed at people interested in replicating specific aspects of the project. Sarah also revealed she was considering creating an online course to share knowledge about sustainable rural development. The online course proposal received enthusiastic support from the community and international partners. During the following months, Sarah developed a comprehensive educational program based on her experience. The course included modules on sustainable cultivation, community organization, protection of traditional knowledge, and participatory leadership. The first online course cohort included participants from dozens of countries. The educational program's success confirmed that Sarah's experience had universal value. During the 32nd year, Sarah received the most prestigious invitation of her career to speak at the opening of the World Conference on Sustainable Development. The conference would bring together world leaders, academics and activists to discuss the global challenges of the 21st century. Sarah was invited as an inspiring example of how local initiatives can have a global impact. She accepted the invitation, seeing it as an opportunity to influence international policy. Sarah's speech at the World Conference was broadcast to millions of people. She told her story as an example that social transformation is possible when there is determination and collaboration. The speech received a standing ovation and was considered one of the most moving moments of the conference. Several international organizations approached Sarah after the speech, offering partnerships and support. One of the most interesting proposals was to create a worldwide network of communities based on the model she developed. Sarah considered the proposal carefully, recognizing both the opportunities and the risks. She decided to accept a modified version that would maintain local autonomy but allow for the exchange of experiences. The worldwide network of sustainable communities began with 10 pilot projects on different continents. Sarah assumed an advisory role in the network, offering guidance but avoiding centralized control. During the following years, the network grew organically, always respecting local particularities. The network's success confirmed that the principles developed by Sarah were universally applicable. At 56, Sarah decided it was time to further reduce her involvement in external activities. She wanted to dedicate more time to her family and the community that had been the center of her life. Nathan had fully taken over the leadership of the project and demonstrated exceptional capability. Dorothy, now 13, was developing her own interests and talents. Frank continued to thrive in his community-based academic career. Sarah felt she had fulfilled her mission of transforming the vacant lot into a source of hope and prosperity. During a walk through the land where it all began, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey she had lived. The spot where she had found the cistern was now a memorial garden dedicated to Aunt Dorothy. The plants grew vigorously in soil that once seemed barren, symbolizing the complete transformation. The old ruin had been preserved as a museum, a reminder of the project's humble origins. Sarah often visited the museum with Dorothy, telling stories about the difficult early days. Dorothy listened to the stories with fascination, barely able to imagine her mother as that desperate young woman. To Dorothy, her mother had always been a respected and successful leader. Sarah made a point of telling the hardest parts of the story, so Dorothy would understand the value of perseverance. During one of these conversations, Dorothy asked if she could also contribute to the project when she grew up. Sarah replied that Dorothy would always be welcome, but that she should choose her own path in life. The most important thing, Sarah said, is that you use your talents to help other people, no matter how you choose to do it. Dorothy nodded with understanding, showing maturity beyond her 13 years. Sarah realized she had raised children who understood the importance of contributing to the common good. During the project's 35th year, Sarah decided to write her complete autobiography. The book would be a personal and intimate narrative of her transformation journey. Sarah specifically wanted to inspire women facing desperate situations similar to her own. She worked on the autobiography for 2 years, revisiting every important moment of her life. The writing process was cathartic, allowing Sarah to fully process her extraordinary experience. The autobiography was published when Sarah turned 58. The book became an international bestseller and was adapted into a documentary and a film. Sarah donated all profits from the autobiography to expand the community's educational programs. While promoting the book, Sarah traveled the world telling her story. She met thousands of people who were inspired by her experience to face their own challenges. Many women sought Sarah out to thank her for showing that radical transformation was possible. The promotional travels confirmed for Sarah that her story had universal value. However, after a year of traveling, she decided she wanted to return to her roots in the community. Sarah concluded that her most important contribution was to continue living the values she preached. She drastically reduced her external commitments and returned to focusing primarily on family and community. During the 37th year, Dorothy turned 15 and was deciding on her educational future. She showed interest in both the sciences and the humanities, reflecting the breadth of her education. Sarah supported whatever direction Dorothy chose, offering guidance without pressure. Dorothy decided she wanted to study international development at a university abroad. The choice surprised Sarah, who had expected Dorothy to choose something more related to plants or agriculture. However, she realized that Dorothy had absorbed the lessons about international cooperation and wanted to apply them on a global scale. Sarah fully supported Dorothy's decision, recognizing in it a natural evolution of family values. Nathan was proud of his sister for choosing her own path while remaining connected to the family's principles. Frank offered all the necessary support so Dorothy could receive the best possible education. The family was united despite the different directions chosen by each member. During the 38th year, Sarah turned 60 and reflected on 4 decades of transformation. She had evolved from a vulnerable young woman into a recognized world leader. More importantly, she had created a legacy that would continue to impact future generations. Nathan was established as a scientist and leader, ensuring competent continuity of the project. Dorothy was prepared to contribute to the world in her own unique way. The community had become a permanent example of sustainable development. Thousands of people had been directly benefited by the programs developed. Hundreds of thousands had been indirectly impacted through replicated projects. Public policies had been positively influenced by the precedents set. Scientific knowledge had been enriched by the research conducted in the community. The protection of traditional knowledge had been strengthened through legal precedents. During a ceremony commemorating Sarah's 60th birthday, the community paid a special tribute. A new statue was unveiled, depicting Sarah at 60, mature and wise. The statue complemented the previous one, showing the evolution from the desperate young woman to the accomplished leader. Sarah was moved by the tribute, but emphasized that the true memorial was the prosperous community itself. During her speech, she thanked once again everyone who had made that extraordinary transformation possible. "Alone, I would never have achieved anything," said Sarah. "It was the strength of collaboration that turned a vacant lot into a paradise." Sarah concluded her speech by expressing confidence in the community's future under the leadership of the new generation. She said she was ready for a new phase of life focused on wisdom and guidance. Nathan spoke on behalf of the new generation, pledging to honor the legacy received. Dorothy, now studying abroad, sent a video message expressing gratitude for the education she had received. Frank thanked everyone for the privilege of being part of that extraordinary history. During the following years, Sarah definitively settled into the role of wise counselor. She offered guidance when asked, but avoided interfering in day-to-day management. Sarah dedicated time to contemplative activities like gardening, reading, and meditation. She also occasionally wrote articles on sustainable development and community leadership. During the 40th year of the project, Sarah turned 64. The community organized a historic celebration marking 4 decades of transformation. The celebration brought together representatives from hundreds of projects inspired by the pioneering experience. Sarah was recognized not only as a founder, but as a permanent symbol of the possibility of transformation. During the main ceremony, she was invited to give a final reflection on the project's meaning. Sarah spoke about how a vacant lot had become a symbol of hope for the entire world. She emphasized that the most important lesson was that no situation is permanently hopeless. With determination, knowledge, and collaboration, any reality can be transformed, said Sarah. Sarah concluded her remarks with a message of hope for future generations. She said she was confident that the values planted in the community would continue to bear fruit indefinitely. Nathan officially assumed the role of lifelong leader of the project during the ceremony. Dorothy, now graduated and working for an international organization, sent a message committing to support the project from her new position. The ceremony culminated with Sarah symbolically planting a new tree in the memorial garden. The tree represented the continuity and eternal growth of the values established in the community. During the final years of her active biography, Sarah dedicated herself primarily to family. She spent time with grandchildren Nathan had, passing down family stories and values. Sarah also mentored young leaders who sought guidance on community development. She wrote her final memoirs focusing on the spiritual and philosophical lessons of her journey. At 70 years old, Sarah could look back and see a completely fulfilled life. She had transformed not only her own situation, but positively impacted thousands of lives. The vacant lot had become a global symbol that social transformation is always possible. The seeds planted by Aunt Dorothy had borne fruit far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Sarah had discovered that the greatest wealth lies in the human capacity to cooperate and create together. She left a legacy that would continue to grow through future generations. The widow who had received a vacant lot discovered in it not just medicinal plants, but the secret to human prosperity based on knowledge, collaboration, and love. End of story. Now tell me in the comments what you thought of this incredible story of overcoming. Do you believe Sarah made the right decisions? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of transformation and hope, don't forget to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories we publish every week. Thank you for your company on this inspiring journey.